starts off with this frame.
Good afternoon. I'm Kevin Brennan with the Notre Dame Alumni Association. Thanks so much for joining us for another edition of On Point at Notre Dame. Father Theodore M. Hessberg passed away last month after an extraordinary career of service to the Church, the world, and of course the University of Notre Dame. Today we'll be exploring his legacy, and we're lucky enough to have with us Father Tom Blantz. Father Blantz was the Vice President for Student Affairs for a time under Father Hesburgh's presidency, and they served together for more than 50 years as priests in the Congregation of Holy Cross. Father Blantz is a long-time, revered, and recently retired professor of history here at the university, and one of his chief areas of research in recent years has been the history of the University of Notre Dame. Father Blantz, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you for inviting me. Happy to be here.
Thanks. For those of you joining us live, just to kind of run down how the program is going to go today, Father Blantz is going to walk us through his thoughts and reflections on Father Hesburgh's life and his legacy here at Notre Dame. And afterwards, he'll be taking your questions. You can submit your questions throughout today's event using the form that you see just underneath the streaming video player on your screen. And you can submit as many questions as you want throughout the event, and we'll try to get to as many of them as we can as time allows. With that, Father Blantz, I'll hand it off to you.
Thank you very much, Kevin. Let me begin by saying a little bit about myself, I suppose. I was born and raised in Massillon, Ohio, about 40 miles south of Cleveland. I graduated from Notre Dame in 1957. I was here from 53 to 57. Father Hesburgh took over in 52, so his first 5 years I was here as a seminarian, living at Morno Seminary. After graduation, I was sent to Rome to study theology. I was ordained a priest in Rome in 1960. I returned to Notre Dame in 1961, received a master's degree in American history. In 1963, went to Columbia University, received my doctorate there. Returned to Notre Dame in 1968. I began teaching. I was the university archivist from 1969 until 1978. From 1970 to 1972, I served as vice president for student affairs. And in recent years, besides teaching, for the past 10 years, I suppose, I used to say Mass, offer Mass at Holy Cross House with Father Hesburgh once a month, and stay there for lunch with him, and usually sit at the table with him. So Father Hesburgh and I did keep contact with each other then over the past 10 years in that way. If somebody asked me, I would say there are probably three outstanding characteristics of Father Hesburgh that struck me anyway. First of all, he was basically a priest. The Mass was central to his life. He said Mass every day, of course. I believe he said his rosary every day, visited the grotto every day he was on campus, the breviary that he said as all of us priests do. And let that cover the rest of his life, I believe, that he always told us, as his assistants, etc., to, in making a decision, don't worry about whether it's going to be the easiest decision or the most popular decision or the least expensive decision. Just make sure it's the right decision. Do it what was morally right to do, and that be easy to defend after that. And I think that spirituality influenced his whole life. I remember once walking through O'Hare Airport with him, and we were coming back from someplace, and Admiral Hyman Rickover was walking there too, and the two recognized each other. They stopped and talked and chatted for a while. Then we went on, and after about 2 minutes, Father Hesburgh just handed me his carry-on baggage and said, "Here, I'll meet you at the gate. There's a fellow over here who needs some help." And it was a blind man, or at least somebody who needed special needs, a person there with a, and Father Hesburgh just went over and led him to his gate, etc. So that there's something about a very charitable person. I think that religious angle did cover his whole day. Secondly, I'd say not only the priesthood, but also I thought he was a very effective administrator. That he delegated very well, picked people to do particular jobs, and then let them do the job, that he rarely was looking over your shoulder. If you needed help, he would certainly come and assist, but picking good people, he thought, and then letting them do the job. He did not let decisions pile up. He was very good at making decisions at the time, did not like a pile of decisions on his desk, and tried to make those decisions as quickly as he could. And I certainly remember several suggestions, I suppose, he gave me as a young person. I was only 36 years old when he appointed me as Vice President of Student Affairs. And the suggestions that he made, we should never have two people worrying about the same thing, that if there was a decision to be made and someone in student affairs that maybe needed to be removed from that particular job, why Father Hessberg would often say, look, Tom, if you want to call him in and remove him, go ahead, I'm going to forget about it. If you want me to do it, I'll call him in and do it, and you forget about it. We don't need two people worrying about the same decision. Or secondly, never make the same decision twice. I remember once leaving dinner with him and going over to our offices, and I just mentioned to him that I had made a decision that afternoon I thought probably wasn't the right decision, and we might have to overturn that later on. And Father Ted just said, you know, never make the same decision twice. Once you make it, forget about it. If you look over your shoulder at the last decision, you're going to miss the one coming at you. So he was I think, a very good administrator, and his instincts were excellent. When he did make a decision, that most of the time those decisions were, you know, right on target. And the way he'd predict what was going to happen, he'd say, well, if you do it this way, why, you're going to get a little bit of bad publicity in the student publications for 2 days or something, then everybody forget about it. It'll turn out to be the right decision. But I think he was a very good, very effective administrator. He could do it in a very pleasing way, etc., but it was a very effective administrator. And a third characteristic I admired about him was his, he was continuing to learn as much as he could. Read articles constantly, various journals, either public journals or Catholic journals that he read, trying to update himself as much as he could, not only on theology and history and other things, but in various fields, science and so on. He continued to learn. I think that's one of the reasons he enjoyed traveling also. He learned so much from traveling, meeting other people and other cultures, and was fascinated by all of that. He was very much at home in the world of ideas. All of us used to notice that at the meeting, board of trustees, or are there any groups of people before a dinner or something with the cocktail hour receptions or something, that he and Father Joyce could go through and meet everybody, chat with everybody, etc. But then if there was time yet before the dinner bell was going to ring, why, Father Hesburgh would generally be moving over towards the university presidents and the idea people, the thinkers, and Father Joyce may be moving over more towards the business people and the sports people and things like this. That Father Hesburgh was just very much at home with the thinkers, with people with ideas, and was fascinated certainly by all of that. And his accomplishments or achievements at Notre Dame, there's so many it's hard to point out or suggest any. I suppose one I would say that he certainly did put the university, make it a real university. When Father Soren founded the university, of course, it wasn't a university in any true sense at the time. There were 4 different classes of students at that particular time. You had the minims, who were the grade school students from age 6 to 12. You had the apprentices or the manual labor students that were learning a particular trade, etc., and those were maybe teenagers primarily. Then you had the junior department or the high school, the normal age, and then the college university students. And that 4th group, the college university students, were always the smallest group of the 4. It wasn't until 1920, until we abolished the high school and the manual labor school, that the college students began to outnumber the others. And so then the Depression strikes and World War II. And it's after World War II, I think, that John Kavanaugh, certainly the President John J. Kavanaugh from 46 to 52, did an awful lot to bring Notre Dame to the launching pad, anyway, of making it possible for Father Hesburgh to emerge this, or to help to lead this into full university status. John Kavanaugh divided the university, or divided the central administration into 5 vice presidents: the vice president for academic affairs, student affairs, business affairs, and financial affairs, and executive vice president to coordinate all of those. Put a good administrative structure in. Began the Notre Dame Foundation, the fundraising arm of the university, knowing that to be a great university, you were going to have the money available to bring in the best professors that you could find, build them the laboratories and the libraries that they were going to need so they could attract some of the best students. Also, Father Kavanaugh, I said, put the things in place for Father Hesburgh. I think when he took over in 1952, the university, as Tom Stritch in his book on his memoirs of Notre Dame said, it was John Kavanaugh that brought us into the 20th century. And in many ways, I think it was. But it was Father Hesburgh then that built on that particular foundation and made the university what it is today, with the graduate programs, the research, raising the SAT scores and things like this, and better professors, and some of the departments that we have still today, and Father Hesburgh left in '87, were certainly the equal of any departments at any university around the country. Secondly, changing the overall administration and putting the university under a board of trustees, predominantly a lay board of trustees, I think was a major impact, obviously, on the university. A board of trustees bringing in ideas from public people of all walks of life, coming in to bring those ideas into the university and to help form the ideas and the goals of the central administration. The Board of Trustees separating the 2 corporations, the University of Notre Dame from the Congregation of Holy Cross, that I don't think it would be possible for the University of Notre Dame to have continued on the progress it has made without making that a separate corporation. The fundraising and the debt and things like this, that a Congregation of Holy Cross would certainly have it difficult to have responsibility for that. I think making it a separate corporation was certainly a major step in letting Notre Dame grow and increase as it has. A third major achievement, obviously, was the decision to admit undergraduate women at Notre Dame in the fall of 1972. But at that time, I think most of the people in the administration were convinced that men and women should be educated together. And as most people know, we did attempt to merge with St. Mary's at that particular time, and when those merger talks fell through or did not result, we decided to admit undergraduate women on our own in 1972, and that certainly has changed the university and made it, I think, a much better place. And a final thought might be that some people also give Father Hesburgh a lot of credit, of course, for surviving the student unrest and the student riots and things like this in the late 60s and early 1970s. And I think that's probably true. Although, on the other hand, Notre Dame students were certainly not nearly as radical, nearly as prone to protest as at other universities. But certainly Father Hesburgh had a tremendous impact on keeping the campus moderate at that particular time and working along with the students step by step. And so there are a lot of other contributions that Father Hesburgh made, and I'm sure these will come up in the questions and answers, but I would just start off with that anyway, Kevin.
Father Blantz, thanks so much. That was very interesting, and I know we're going to have a number of questions generated as a result. For those of you watching live, remember you can submit your questions using the form on the page just below the streaming video player. You can submit as many questions as you like, and we will try to get to as many of them as we can as time allows. You mentioned, Father Blantz, the issue, which was one that was brought up a number of times during the days following Father Hesburgh's passings, with the memorial service of coeducation at Notre Dame when it was introduced at the undergraduate level in 1972. Were you the Vice President of Student Affairs leading up to that kind of historic moment?
Yes, I was.
And how, it's for us now kind of in more recent times at the university, how, controversial was that decision at the time?
It probably was controversial in the minds of many of the alumni that Notre Dame had been a very successful university for all of those years, and the alumni had gotten a good education here, and it looks like now we were changing things. Why were we changing it? Was it necessary to change it, etc.? And I think it was just a matter of the administration and others convincing the alumni that it wasn't going to change at all, that we were simply going to continue the good education that they received, and now would simply be for both men and women. And but there's background of it too, Kevin, and maybe I should say that certainly this was in the wake of the Second Vatican Council, where the Second Vatican Council closed in the mid-60s, and emphasizing that the church is all the people of God. It said not just the clergy and the hierarchy, etc., but the lay also, and the laymen should have, lay men and women should have a greater impact in the church and playing a greater role in the church through their baptism, etc. And so that and education, Catholic education, was one place where they certainly could have a role in the Catholic Church in the United States, and there were other reasons for it. I mean, every university wants to better itself as much as it can, and what that means, of course, is you want better, better students and better faculty, etc. And as far as students went, we were accepting students only from one half of the human race, just from the male population, and therefore we open it up to women also. The pool would be much larger, etc., and certainly would upgrade the level of the students. Secondly, at that time, in the past, many of our students as an all-male university were coming from single-sex high schools, college prep high schools and things like this. But this was a period in the 50s and 60s where various dioceses were going into central Catholic high schools and combining the men and women's high schools into one. And so many of the prospective students then had been to coeducational grade school and middle schools and high schools, and coming to Notre Dame was looked like a step back, perhaps, and maybe where people were less attractive to applying for Notre Dame for that reason. And women obviously were taking greater roles in public life and education, business, etc. And if our graduates were going to be working with women in those areas for the rest of their lives, why they might as well get used to it and start doing it now in education, in college. And finally, there was a question, I suppose, Kevin, of Catholic education being available for Catholic women, that it was difficult for some Catholic women's colleges to survive just on tuition at this particular time. And this was a period of stagflation and things like this. And therefore, if you're living just on tuition, it was going to be difficult to survive, and many Catholic girls' colleges, women's colleges, then were closing at this particular time. And therefore, that universities like St. Louis and Notre Dame and others perhaps better open to Catholic women, or there simply weren't going to be places for them. So I think that most people, most at Notre Dame, the administration, were convinced that men and women should be educated together. And the logical thing seemed to be to try to merge with St. Mary's, and that's what we attempted to do, and that unfortunately did not result.
And we have a related question, I think, coming in from one of those earliest female undergraduate students here at Notre Dame. If we can get it here, I think Janine was asking, as one of the first female students, she would love to hear what some of the issues you had to work through on the administrative level. She says, I'd love to hear about some of the issues they had to work through with Father Ted in preparing to welcome the women to campus here at Notre Dame.
My area, obviously, was in student affairs. I was vice president for student affairs from 1970 to 1972. And so that was my concern. Now, it was a little bit difficult because, I say, we had planned on merging with St. Mary's. I was vice president for student affairs, and therefore I presumed that various questions we had of changing residence halls or the dining halls or things like this, that the experts in St. Mary's would tell me, do we need a gynecologist, for example, in the health center? Well, I knew that the people at the health area in St. Mary's would have all this expertise and would tell. And then when we decided not to merge with St. Mary's, that we were on our own while I was making those decisions ourselves. in the merger talks with St. Mary's, my team in student affairs, myself, the director of student activities and director of campus ministry, and the prefect of discipline, or dean of men, and director of housing, the 5 of us and 3 of our students would meet with the 5 at St. Mary's and and 3 of their students, and trying to work out the merger. When that did not eventuate, well, then I asked those 3 young students at St. Mary's if they would simply be an advisory board for me, to advise me on what we might need over here. And for example, one thing they suggested was in the residence halls that we needed more closet space and more common space, and so that's why I picked Walsh and Baden Hall. Walsh does have built-in closets. Walsh had that full basement in Walsh Hall, etc., because they weren't sure what we were going to do with parietal hours and various things like this. So it was questions of picking the residence halls was a decision. This decision was made for academic reasons, to bring about 325 women in that year, 125 first-year students, 200 transfer students. I decided I didn't want, Morrissey Hall would have just about fit at that particular time. I decided I didn't want just one woman rector and one a woman student body, a hall president. And so it narrowed it down to I wanted 2 halls, etc. So that eliminated a lot of the halls were much too big for that, etc. And Carroll Hall and Holy Cross Hall were a little bit too far out for security reasons, etc. And so it boiled down to Walsh, Soren, Baden, Howard, and Lyons, and just picking 2 of those, etc. So there were a lot of interesting questions that we had to face at that particular time, and as a matter of fact, I guess the first question was whether we were going to have single-sex dormitories or co-ed dormitories, and we decided to stay with the single-sex dormitories.
Speaking of the dormitories and the decisions you had to make, I think we have another question coming in. It says here from Richard, was the housing of women graduate students in Lewis Hall in the fall of 1968 considered a trial balloon for the switch to co-education?
That's a good question. I don't think so. We certainly were merging, put it this way, in 1965 we began the co-exchange program, the COEX program, where Notre Dame students could take classes at St. Mary's, and St. Mary's students could take classes on the Notre Dame campus. And we decided to do that in 1965, and with no exchange of finances at all, just as an experimental program to see how that would work. And it was very successful. And then year by year after that, more and more changes were taking place. The Department of Film, Theater, and Television merged into one department, because obviously in your plays, your theater, etc., you needed both men and women. And so to merge those two, the 2 sociology departments merged into one. And so the merger was the 2 universities, college and university, were getting closer and closer cooperation, etc. during that particular time. We had a summer school program, obviously. Summer schools began in the 1919, which was chiefly for priest brothers and sisters to come to summer school and pick up either a bachelor's degree or a master's degree, so they could teach at their high schools and grade schools, etc., back where they were in their own diocese, and so on. And now there were more and more sisters that were interested in not just doing it at summer school, but coming during the regular year also. And so I think that's why Lewis Hall was built. That's why it's put off a little bit to the side, away from a lot of the noise on the campus, etc. There's almost a cloister there in the beginning, if you on the ground floor there, where with a courtyard in the middle, very nice for. It was built for sisters, graduate students, etc. So that I don't. It's certainly, we learned a lot from that, I think, in moving towards coeducation, but I rather think that was primarily as a convenient and comfortable place for sisters to be on this, in 1968, all-male campus during the regular school year.
Interesting. For those of you watching live, just a reminder, you can submit your questions using the question box just underneath the live streaming video player, and we'll get to as many of them as we can. And we've got another question coming in for you here, Father Blantz. And this one, George asks, Father, could you talk about Father Ted's appointment as president? How did such a young priest achieve so much at such a young age?
At that time, of course, the Notre Dame was owned and operated by the Congregation of Holy Cross, and every year each one of us would simply get a letter of appointment for next year, what your assignment was going to be. Father John Kavanaugh was the president from 1946 to 1952. He was also the religious superior of all of us priests, all of the priests on campus at that time. Canon law at that time said that you could only be a religious superior for 6 years, and you had to leave that particular office. So that everybody from 1919 until 1952 had been president of Notre Dame for only 6 years and left. So that when John Kavanaugh took over in 1946, he did appoint another Holy Cross priest, or asked another Holy Cross priest to be appointed, Father John Murphy, to be his vice president. It was a 3-year term as president and another 3-year term. After a 3-year term, Father John Murphy resigned, and he picked Father Theodore Hesburgh. Father Hesburgh was young at that time, but I think John Kavanaugh, certainly a very, very good administrator, a very good executive, and certainly could see that there was a tremendous talent there in Father Theodore Hesburgh, and so picked him, young though he was. He'd only been ordained in 1943, and got his doctorate in 1945, and came back with chairman of the theology department, and then in 1949, Father Kavanaugh selected him to be his executive vice president, and more than likely then his successor also. But I think the reason was that he simply, John Kavanaugh certainly, and most other people could see the tremendous talent that Father Hesburgh had, and he was a logical man to take over the university.
The next question we have comes in, it's about leadership, and Amy asks, what is one thing you took from Father Ted's leadership and one thing he took from, I think it means one thing that you took from Father Ted's relationship with students?
Father Hesburgh could make very difficult decisions. There were principles that he held and stuck to them certainly all of his life, I believe, and some of those in the area of student affairs. One of them was a matter of courtesy. You're going to be, try to be as courteous as you can towards other people. That was one of the reasons why that so-called 15-minute rule that Father Hesburgh put in 68 and 69. That at that time there were protests, of course, with the Dow Chemical and CIA recruiters on campus, and the students decided that some students would, certainly on the second floor of the main building there, simply lay down and almost like a picket line, etc., that any student that wanted to interview with either one of those two were going to have to step over one of your fellow students, one of your colleagues, to do that. And it would make you think a little bit, do I really want to do this and step over one of my classmates to do this? Well, Father Hesburgh felt that wasn't, that you should at least leave an opening there that they can walk through, etc., and that's the more courteous thing to do, because some people wouldn't do that. Some other people, maybe working in their offices, secretaries or others, would not want to step over students, etc., and so you were slowing down or maybe disrupting the university. And so Father Hesburgh was very much opposed to that and held the line on that. As most people know, 10 students were suspended for a semester for not getting up when the Dean of Students asked them to do. So Father Hesburgh certainly did have those basic principles, but other than that, he certainly wasn't sensitive himself about students being kind of disrespectful to him at times, I suppose, and could put up with a lot of criticism, and I think I learned a lot about that. You have to have, I wouldn't say you have to have thick skin or something like this, but once again, do what you think is right, and don't worry about whether it's going to be popular, or whether it's going to be easy, or anything else. That the important thing is to keep your eye on that prize, what you want to do with this university, what decisions you want to have made, and then make those decisions as best you can. And I think all of us, or anybody working with Father Hesburgh, admired that about him, that there were basic principles that he had, and certainly was not going to compromise those at all. But on the other hand, don't let your personal feelings or personal injuries or anything like that enter into it at all.
We have another question coming in here about kind of Father Hesburgh's place on the world stage. Mike asks, how did Father Ted's responsibilities on the national and international stage influence his viewpoint as Notre Dame's president?
I think it influenced it very much. George Schuster, who was his assistant here in the 60s and 70s, used to make the statement that a university president that you don't see off campus probably isn't worth seeing on campus either. In other words, the university president needs to be out in the public eye and bringing in ideas from other areas, from other people, etc. And so the Father Hesburgh, I think his travels and things like this did bring in a lot of new ideas and kept him intellectually sharp and so on. And so I think Father Hesburgh traveling and visiting other universities and other corporations and things like this brought in ideas to the university and stimulated all of the rest of us, I suppose, to think more deeply of things, make a more global view and things like this. And also being on other people's boards of directors and trustees and things like this, doing favors for them. He could call on them very easily to assist him at times. I remember on one particular occasion that somebody had given us a fairly large donation of stock, of European stock actually, and Father Hesburgh just mentioned it. Well, you know, I could have probably spent a week trying to decide whether I should keep this stock or sell it or what I should do. But he said I had just done a favor for David Rockefeller on the Rockefeller board, and so I just called David and I said, you know, David, I've got so much money in this particular stock. You know, you've got some brilliant people there looking into this. You know, why don't you just ask him? What should I do? Would it be best for me to sell this, or should I keep it, or what should I do with it? And he said about 2 hours later, David called me back and said, this is what my expert said. So he said, Father Ted said, you know, I could make that decision in 2 hours and know it was and probably the very right decision to make. And it would take me a week to do, and I might have made the wrong one. So by all these other outside contacts that he had, I think, brought in new ideas to the university and different views, et cetera, from the university, but also brought in expertise from these other people that he could call on because he was doing favors for them also.
Another question coming in is maybe one of a more humorous nature for you. Marcy asks, do you have a humorous story or memory about Father Hesburgh that you could share with us?
Oh, goodness. I can't think of any right now that about that. No, I don't think so. It's a good question, though. I'm sure as soon as this is over, I'll think of several of them, but I can't, right off the top of my head right now, think of anything.
Well, kind of on the topic of your, personal relationship with Father Hesburgh, you mentioned earlier that you would, even towards the end of his life, you would often say Mass with him and eat lunch. What was, as a fellow member of the Holy Cross community here in South Bend, what was Father Ted like as a larger member kind of Holy Cross? What was his relationship like with his fellow Holy Cross priests living here at Notre Dame?
Well, the relationship was obviously, very good. Father Hesburgh, as I said, continued to want to learn and to grow more and more, and so he was reading voraciously. And even towards the end of his life, when he was almost blind, of course, he had students reading to him and every day, and one of the student employment, and so that he was an excellent conversationalist at times because he was interested in so many different things, and he could, take the ball at times and run with it and with the conversation. But on the other hand, he was always picking other people's brains and asking, what you were doing, what you're working on, or what you're reading these days, and things like that, and trying to, learn more and more himself. So that I think at Holy Cross House, the last, several years of his life, he's not a morning person, obviously, and so he didn't get up that early in the morning. and have Mass together at 11:30 and lunch together, and then he would go over to his office from 1 o'clock to 5 o'clock, and maybe come back to Holy Cross House for dinner, but maybe had an appointment with somebody else for dinner. And by the time he got back to Holy Cross House, many of the other people were in their rooms or in bed or something at that time. So, but the relationship with the members of the community were always very good, and I think everybody admired Father Hesburgh and was grateful for all the things that he had contributed, not only to Notre Dame, but simply to the Congregation of Holy Cross. And the relationships, I think, were were simply very good.
The week following Father Hesburgh's passing was a very moving, one, I think, and meaningful one for everyone in the Notre Dame family. What was it like, with the wake and the funeral and the memorial service that week from the perspective of a fellow Holy Cross priest? What was that experience like?
Like everybody else, I thought it was a very impressive ceremony. The ceremony certainly had been, prepared for several years, that knowing this eventually was going to happen, etc. And so they had been, preparing this and updating it year by, periodically, because some of the people that they might have wanted to invite to speak at the wake or something like this had passed on and things like this, and were not able to be there. And so it was a long time in preparation. I remember once, this isn't necessarily humorous, but I remember once talking to him, and he just mentioned that morning that he had reviewed his obituary from the New York Times, that periodically the New York Times would send him a copy of the obituary they're going to publish at his death, just to have him updated and things like this. And now I'm sure everything is online, and so he doesn't have to do that. But but it was certainly a very impressive ceremony, I thought. Very impressed with the students, with the all-night vigil in the Basilica, the students being there in each hall for an hour, being at the visitation there, lining the road to the cemetery. I think was some of the students there maybe for an hour and a half in that cold day, just standing there waiting for the funeral mass to end and to procession to get moving towards the cemetery. I was tremendously impressed with it. I thought the service that evening here at the Joyce Center was very impressive. The speakers there, Senator Simpson, I think, was very good, and all of them I think were Lou Holtz and Jimmy Carter, Ann Thompson, I thought did an excellent job as a mistress of ceremony there. No, I was very impressed with it, and I think it was well deserved that he certainly was a national figure, an international figure, a educator, and a university person, and all of those were represented, I think, in the funeral service, and I was very impressed with it.
We have another question coming in from the audience. This question comes in from Greg, and he asks, could you talk about Father Ted's role in shaping Notre Dame as a Catholic university?
I believe when Father Hesburgh assumed the presidency in 1952, he felt that there really wasn't a great American Catholic university. I believe he felt that the Jesuits, the Society of Jesus, could have made any one of their universities an outstanding university by taking the best people they had in Georgetown, Boston College, or St. Louis, or Marquette, or wherever, and but having 28 different universities and doing a great job in all of them, why weren't going to put all of their the best people in one place. And that Father Hesburgh felt that there should be some Catholic university that's going to be up there on the same level, perhaps, as a Harvard or Yale or Princeton, and being in those same circles and those same conversations. And and he thought that Notre Dame could be the one to do that. I think he knew how to do it. As I said before, I think Father John J. Kavanaugh had put laid the foundation for that very clearly, with the Notre Dame Foundation fundraising arm of the university, having that to try to bring in the money that's going to be necessary to recruit some of the best professors and build the best laboratories and things like this. But I think Father Hesburgh had that idea that he wanted to make Notre Dame one of the top universities in the country, and had that right from the very beginning, and did it step by step, and I think accomplished it. But I think that was his view, and at the same time, it was going to be a great Catholic university, and meaning having outstanding students and faculty, and also keeping the Catholic mission. And I think that he was very successful in doing that.
A reminder for those of you joining us live, you can submit your questions using the form just underneath the streaming video. You can submit as many questions as you want. Get them in now. We don't have a ton of time left, and Father Blantz will try to get him to answer as many questions as we can as time allows. I believe we have another question coming in here about Father Hesburgh's legacy. This comes from Angie. What advice would you give to Notre Dame's leadership about how to preserve Father Hesburgh's legacy moving forward?
I think that both Father Malloy and Father Jenkins are doing an excellent job in doing that. That, as I said before, to make it a great Catholic university, you need to have, it has to be as a great university to start with, and great Catholics keep the Catholic mission alive also. And I think both of his successors have been very good in doing that. It's a great challenge to do that. As every other university across the country is improving itself also, and the Notre Dame has to do the same, and trying to get better faculty all the time and better students all the time, and also trying to keep a strong eye on that Catholic mission, of course, and to make sure that the Catholic character of the university remains central to it. And I think both of them have been very successful in doing that. I think that was Father Hesburgh's image of the university and his goal, and I think that both Father Malloy and Father Jenkins have carried it on very well.
One of the topics that was discussed a lot when looking at Father Hesburgh's legacy during the week following his passing was obviously civil rights, with his service on the Civil Rights Commission. I'm going to tap into your other area of expertise here for a moment, American history, and can you put into perspective for us, at the time when Father Hesburgh was serving on the Civil Rights Commission in the 1950s and 1960s into the 70s, how controversial was that, especially for a university president who was in some ways tasked with raising money? How controversial or bold was it of Father Hesburgh to kind of take a stand on one of the leading moral issues of the day, specifically at that time in American history?
It certainly was a bold step, but on the other hand, it was a question Father Hesburgh, I think, was absolutely convinced was the right thing to do, that the segregation and the discrimination that was characterizing the United States during this particular period, I think he certainly was opposed to, that each one of us is a child of God, created in the image and likeness of God, brothers and sisters of each other in Christ, etc. And the way that some minorities were being treated, he certainly strongly opposed. And so that when the Civil Rights Act was passed in 1957 and President Eisenhower asked Father Hesburgh to be on that, why, I think there was no question. I think he did tell Sherman Adams, Eisenhower's chief of staff, that he wasn't looking for any more jobs, etc. But if the president wanted him to do it, why, he was certainly willing to accept that position. And I think he was kind of a moral force on that, on the Civil Rights Commission. As you know, there were 3 Northerners and 3 Southerners, 3 Democrats and 3 Republicans, although Father Hesburgh could smile about that a little bit, because when Sherman Adams asked him, I think told him, we've already got 3 Republicans and we've got 2 Democrats, we presume you're a Democrat. And Father Hesburgh said, well, I'm an independent. And so I said, well, we'll put you down as a Democrat. And so anytime anybody retired and the president wanted to, they just shifted, I think, Father Hesburgh over to the other side, because he would not tell what his politics was. But I think he was a moral force on that. This is the right thing to do, and I think gave encouragement to other people on the board, etc. And then when President Nixon appointed him as chairman of the board of the Civil Rights Commission, why that was a challenge for him, because it soon became clear that he and President Nixon did not agree on several things, and one of them was the busing of children to to integrate the school, to desegregate the schools. That Father Hessberg felt that we had been using busing to keep the schools segregated for all of these years. Now we could certainly use the busing to desegregate those schools and so on. And how much to leave up to the court system. That the Civil Rights Act said that you could withhold federal funds to institutions that were still practicing segregation. And Lyndon Johnson had withheld some funds, and President Nixon had restored some of those funds to southern states, and Father Hesburgh came out strongly opposed to that. That President Nixon thought that, well, we'll just let it up to the courts to decide this rather than the executive do it. But going through a court system on various levels, the district court, the circuit courts, and the Supreme Court is going to take so long, and Father Hesburgh didn't want to take that long. So I think he was a moral force on the Civil Rights Commission. He got criticism at times for some of his stands on busing, for example. But once again, I think Father Hesburgh felt this was an issue that needed to be addressed, and it was the right thing to do, and so he was willing to do it.
We have another
despite
question.
The controversy.
We have a question coming in about Father Hesburgh's spirituality. Samuel asks, when and how did the Holy Spirit and Our Lady spiritually become a major influence on Father Hesburgh's life?
Yeah. I can't say exactly when this started. He certainly great devotion to the Holy Spirit, and I didn't know him before he was president, and but certainly as president, why he was admitted that this is his favorite prayer, just come Holy Spirit. When he had a tough decision to make, he could just say that prayer briefly, come Holy Spirit, and make the decision, and he insisted that invariably the decision turned out to be correct for him. This is a university dedicated to the Blessed Mother, to Notre Dame, Our Lady, and so his spirituality and devotion to the Blessed Mother came quite naturally to him there. And I think probably also from his Irish mother growing up and things like that. So I think that they did characterize his life as long as I knew him when he was president of the university, and maybe even before that. But certainly they were, as the questioner mentioned, they were certainly two strong pillars of his life: devotion to the Holy Spirit and to the Blessed Mother.
Another member of our audience is interested in Father Hesburgh's relationship with another one of your former fellow priests in Holy Cross. Bill asks, could you speak at all about Father Hesburgh's relationship with Father Joyce?
Yes, it was a very interesting relationship. As Father Hesburgh mentioned in his memoirs, that the two can be quite opposite, and in some ways that Father Hesburgh was more liberal, Father Joyce is more conservative. Father Hesburgh is not that interested in sports, and Father Joyce was, and et cetera. One's a northerner, one's a southerner, et cetera. But they did work very well together as a team. There was no question that Father Hesburgh was the president and making the final decisions. But as a matter of fact, Father Hesburgh was chiefly interested in the academic side and the student affairs side of the university, and the other side, the business side, the financial side, the buildings and things like this, let Father Joyce pretty much, be almost supreme over those. That there were times that you certainly could, if Father Joyce had made a decision in finance or something, you could appeal to Father Hesburgh. But the odds are that Father Joyce was going to, that he was running that side of the university, and Father Hesburgh was overseeing all of it. But it was a very good relationship. Father Hesburgh said that he didn't think they had a serious argument in the 35 years that they were president and executive vice president of the university, and I could believe that they had, there were times when Father Hesburgh wanted to do something, and Father Joyce might say, well, we don't have the money to do that or something. It's going to be difficult to do this. But once Father Hesburgh made the decision, why Father Joyce would somehow find the money someplace, and what happened. It was a very good, I say they were in many ways different types of people, different personalities, but they worked together excellently, I thought, as a team.
Our next question is about another one of Father Hesburgh's key lieutenants. This comes from David. What was Father Ted's relationship with Moose Krause?
As far as I know, very good. Moose Krause was an excellent Catholic gentleman. I believe he brought in Moose Krause to be athletic director when there was some concern about Frank Leahy's health and things like this at the as a football coach in the late 40s and early 50s. And I think Moose, as a director of athletics, was able to be a good go-between and liaison between Frank Leahy and the higher administration. And then Ed Krause was certainly an outstanding, Catholic, and made a good. Besides being a tremendous athlete himself, as most people know, the rumor is that they have the 3-second rule in basketball because of Moose Krause. That Moose could just stand in the keyhole and just keep putting him in. He was so big and could bump everybody else out of the way, etc. And whether it's true or not, I don't know. But he certainly was an outstanding Catholic gentleman, and I think the relationship between Father Hesburgh and Ed was very good. Towards the end of his life, when, as many people know, Mr. Krause's wife was in a serious car accident, and it made it very difficult for years after that. She was in a nursing home, etc. And but Ed took wonderful care of her. I think went to the nursing home 3 times a day to feed her and things like this. He was just an outstanding human being, I think. And I think Father Hesburgh and he got along very well.
We only have a few minutes left, so for those of you watching live, remember now is kind of your last chance to submit questions here for Father Blantz, and we're going to try to get to a few more here in the last few minutes. This question comes in from Tim, and Tim asks, you have such a wealth of knowledge about Notre Dame's history. Did Father Ted enjoy learning about it and discussing it as well?
Absolutely, yes. As Kevin said, I am trying to do some research into the history of the university, and for the past 2 years, and I've written, I guess I got about 600 or 650 pages or something, and Father Hesburgh was very interested in it, and this is still a first draft, and so I told him I didn't want to make another copy of it. I didn't want to copy loose, but I do have an undergraduate assistant that's typing this and putting it on a computer. And so she would go over, he asked, and she would go over every Sunday afternoon and read it to him off her computer, etc. He was always interested in it and had comments, etc. about it. And when I would meet with him then after Mass once a month and sitting at his table, he'd often talk about it and what his views of it, and was certainly very interested in always coming up with ideas of how I could do it faster. He certainly wanted to get it. Wanted me to finish it, and but it was a slow work, and so I wasn't doing it quite as fast as I think he would have liked. But he certainly was always interested in it and had comments about it, and yes, very much so.
We talked a lot about Father Hesburgh's many accomplishments, leading the university. Is there one that you think gets overlooked as we look back at Father Hesburgh's career now that maybe doesn't get enough attention, but was something that really changed Notre Dame for the better?
I think, they do get a lot of publicity, but I think the 2 major things would be the establishment of a predominantly lay board of trustees. I think that changed the whole tenor of the university and made it possible for us to move forward as fast as we have since that time. It's not just a matter of, the trustees running the university or something, or donating money to the university and things like this. I think it made it possible of separating the 2 corporations to let the university now really progress much faster and in a broader realm than it would before. And the decision to permit undergraduate women, I said, was a major change also at the university, and a major change, for the better. And I think the university is much better for those 2. Do get a lot of publicity, but I think they were the 2 major ones that I would say.
One of the things we learned here at the Alumni Association in the days and weeks following Father Hesburgh's passing was that it seems like everyone had kind of their own Father Ted story, that so many people had their own interactions with him. And I think that's what our next question deals with. Josh asks, could you talk about Father Ted's role as a people person? He was always so willing to welcome people and make time for them.
Absolutely. As all of us know, when he was president and his office on third floor there of the main building that students could late at night crawl up the fire escape and rap on the window, etc. And he was willing to let them, talk to them and bring them in, or if they'd call him, I'd go down to the front door and open the door when it was locked and bring them in. In a way, he never met a stranger. I think that meeting people in airports and other things like this, if people come up to him, they'd recognize him, that he could be very gracious with them and so on. And I think he was very much of a people person. He just loved other people, I think, to learn from other people and listen to them and was interested in what they were doing, and is very much of an outgoing people person, I think.
And as we've talked about, you had a personal relationship with Father Hesburgh. As you look back on that relationship, what's the fondest memory you have of Father Hesburgh?
Oh, there's so many. I suppose the 2 years that I was vice president for student affairs, how those were difficult. I was made vice president of student affairs in June of 1970, right after the Kent State shootings and Jackson State shootings in May and April and May of that year. Student unrest, and I had only been on the faculty for 2 years, etc., and was pretty young and didn't have any administrative experience at all, and yet he asked me to take the job, and I agreed to do it. And how gracious he was, and always helpful, etc. There were times when there were tough decisions. Why he'd often tell me, "Look, if you want to forget about it, I'll make the decision. I'll do the dirty work or something like this, and you just forget about it." And but he was certainly very very gracious and very understanding, trying to be as helpful as he could, and I was just very impressed by that. And at the same time, being, as I said before, being such a spiritual man himself, and kind of an inspiration, for me to not to let the tough decisions and the opposition and the criticism or anything else affect you, deep down. It's all on the surface, and still try to be the priest and the gentleman and the personable person that you want to be, and don't let the job or the criticism or anything else have an effect on it. So he's, I can honestly say, I think he was the most outstanding man I ever met in my life, and very influential.
And you mentioned that you're working on kind of a documentation of the history of Notre Dame. When you look over the whole history of the university, and you're kind of looking at the most impactful people in the university's history, where does Father Hesburgh rank?
As a president, I would put Father Soren as first, the most influential, and I'd put Father Hesburgh second. Father Marvin O'Connell that did the biography of Father Soren, dedicated to Father Hesburgh, the second founder of Notre Dame, and in a way that is probably true. So I would probably, Father Burns as president, maybe third, and things like that. Father Tom Walsh fourth or something, but I would put Father Hesburgh certainly second, and the impact that he had on the university.
Well, Father Blantz, unfortunately, I think we're all out of time here today for our episode of On Point at Notre Dame. Thank you so much for being here, for sharing your memories and your great wealth of historical knowledge about the university. We really appreciate it, and I think we all learned a lot, so thanks so much.
Thank you for having me.
And thanks to all of you who joined us live, and thanks to those of you watching later on My Notre Dame or on our YouTube account. Just a reminder, for all future episodes of On Point at Notre Dame and all of our other online learning events, and to watch all of our past shows, you can visit us at my.nd.edu/learn. Thanks so much for watching. I'm Kevin Brennan with the Notre Dame Alumni Association. Go Irish.